time things to cover. And of course, one of the reasons we're here, of course, has to do with our budget. And we're going to need to have a motion. I think I'm not going to call for discussion on it, but I think it's best to go ahead and cover the entire budget together, not take them individually and so forth, making a motion each time. It's all right for us to. Yeah, I will, but I was just gonna, okay. Okay, calling this meeting to order. We need to look at the minutes and approve them from the last meeting. Can we have a motion by Betty, seconded by Danny? I didn't call you Danny. I was looking at Danny. Okay, does anybody have any, somebody tie this thing together. It won't reach all the way over. That's all right. I'm not used to all it, I guess. Okay, I got her now. All right, looking at our minutes from the previous meeting of August and September. If there be no corrections or comments, I would like to call for the vote on this. All those in favor of adopting the minutes from these two previous meetings signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to our budget, and we need a motion to cover this entire budget with one motion. Motion by Sharon, seconded by Terry. You want me to call for a vote on that? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a real short slide deck to kind of give an overview for the committee if you'd like. We'd happy to do that if you'd like.
I would like that. I would like you to proceed with that.
All right. Committee members, you can find that up on the monitors. If you have your iPads, you can also refresh your iPads and it'll be there as well. This year's cover photo, Cedar Hills Drive, near the top of the hill. You are standing in Member Elsasser's district and looking into Member Ricker's district in this photo. All right. And I'm going to go stand at the podium, it looks like. So across all funds, the recommended budget this year has $150,600,000 and change in revenues. You'll note that intergovernmental revenues are roughly a third, or a little bit more than a third of the total revenues, and that's our largest source. Charges for services is the second largest, and property taxes is our third largest source of revenue. On the expenditure or use of fund side, it's 154 million, almost 900,000 in recommended. The largest of that is in personnel, which includes wages, benefits, and pensions. Obviously, our workforce continues to be a critical piece and an important piece of our budget on our annual spend. Looking at property taxes, we're recommending that the rate remain flat and unchanged from prior years, as has been longstanding policy of the county board, at 82.41 cents per $100 of equalized assessed value. When you apply that rate to the value of taxable property in Peoria County, that means that the recommended levy is $31.34 million, and it is divided, as you see here in the pie chart. So the blue and the gray wedges represent our operating funds, and the tan represent pension-related funds. And then you will see that we traditionally would have a third color, and that is debt service, but there is no property tax being levied for debt service as defined by traditional and generally accepted accounting practices. Of note, the nursing home or Headington Oaks levy is an operating fund, but you apply those operating dollars to debt service, is how that works out. Countywide, the Supervisor Assessments Office and the elected township assessors just finished, and we all received our assessment notices for the quadrennial reassessment process. Across the entire county, the value of taxable property is going up by 6.7%. It is sometimes higher, sometimes lower within individual different taxing districts. For example, I believe it's 7% or a little bit more than 7% within the city of Peoria. Specific to this committee's oversight has $26.6 million in revenue and $30.75 million in expenditures. They are divided amongst a number of different departments, most of them related to the highway department, but not all. And you can see how those are divided there on the bar charts. Where does this committee compare to the other committees of the county board? You'll see infrastructure committee here is in tan, and you have oversight of 18% of the entire budget's revenues and 20% of the expenditures. You do have at least one general fund department under your supervision, so we also include a breakout of the general fund. It's our largest fund. It's our basically our corporate operating fund, if you want to refer to it as that. It is the recommended budget in the general fund is balanced at $56,770,000 and change. Intergovernmental revenues, which include all of our sales tax, all of our income tax, and the general fund's share of personal property replacement tax, along with the salary reimbursements, is by far and away the largest revenue stream in the general fund at $28 million. So it's roughly half of the general fund's revenues. On the expenditure side, we've got $36.3 million in recommended personnel costs. That's again wages and benefits, and so that's pretty almost 60% or thereabouts, between 55 and 60% of the general fund's expenditures are related to our workforce and the work that they do. And then this is just how this committee's oversight shows as it relates to the entire general fund budget. You have less than 1% of the revenues at $300,000, and the facilities and grounds maintenance department is really on the expenditure side, and that's 5% of the general fund. Mr. Chairman, we're happy to answer any questions you and the committee might have. I'd like to call out all the departments and offices that helped put the entire budget together. Their work was instrumental. Also, like to acknowledge the work that Heather and the finance department did this year in pulling it together. We all remember in January we went live with a new finance software, Munis. As we continue to learn how to use Munis and maximize it, that'll be a couple-year process, by the way. We also implemented a new software system separate from Munis, but in terms of that helps us put the budget book together, and that's called Pattern Stream. And getting those two to talk was sometimes a little bit of a challenge, but Heather and the team were able to work through it. A lot of hours went into the book, and we do have a couple of minor modifications for you. At your table, at your desk, you should have a packet with a paper clip, and you'll see these are just updated pages. They've got the front section, and then the summary pages for the committee are also updated. If you look in your binder for the sources and uses for the entire committee, For whatever reason, that pattern stream software printed and named every other fund as opposed to all of them. The materials that are in the paperclip update that use. So there's no changes that we're asking for in terms of what was recommended, but just some updated information for you. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I too want to publicly thank, I'm sure that each one of our individual members have thanked you when they've taken time to go over the budget with you. And I especially appreciate last Friday when Heather, as well as Shauna, under your direction, came to the meeting and they answered any questions that I had. And after I got away, there was a few things I thought about. As every time you leave a meeting, you'll think of something else maybe. And I had asked you about the use of our Keystone money, and I wondered if you could say anything, because I have been asked about the use of the Keystone money, and there are possibly some of the communities like Bartonville and Chillicothe, Elmwood, they may have projects where they could use some of the Keystone money, just as the city of Peoria, which was a wonderful job that we did in helping those people out there on Willow Road, as well as I'm trying to think of Allen Road. When we developed that project and we used that for economic development as it must be used, are you guys in the process of possibly developing any plans to deal with the community's use of the Keystone money?
So, great question, Mr. Chairman. For Mr. Kelch and Mr. Ruland, whose first budget we're going through today and this year, Keystone Fund, it's technically referred to in your book as the County State Capital Improvement Project Fund, but we all call it Keystone. You'll actually find it in the back of the book in either the gray or the purple pages, because it'll fall under the jurisdiction of, I believe, the executive committee, because it's, as Mr. Salzer alluded to, it's economic development. For everyone's benefit, in the early 2000s, we received 4 grants from the state of Illinois. Each grant was $2.5 million in size, and we turned around and loaned those dollars to Keystone Steel and Wire to ideally prevent them from going into bankruptcy. It did not prevent them from going into bankruptcy, but they emerged from bankruptcy stronger. They're now known as Liberty Steel, and they were able to repay the county the entire $10 million on time, or actually early. What then that allows the county to do is to have a little nest egg for economic development related projects. As long as we're somehow involved and engaged, this county board could either make loans or grants to both local governments or private entities, should you choose to, based on what that project might be, so long as it's for an economic development purpose. And so, long answer to Mr. Salzer's question, in that, yes, Keystone can be used for those purposes. If another unit of government were to approach us, it's then a function of whether or not the county board would want to use it for that purpose, which is a policy decision, and then whether that would be in the form of a grant or the form of a loan. Historically, the county board has made loans, not grants, but that obviously would be at the discretion of the full board to do.
Thank you. And another thing that I certainly want to thank you and your staff for is the emphasis that I think you placed on capital improvements, as well as another very, very important thing, and I think with our hiring of a consultant it's going to help, capital maintenance. And I want to thank you guys, your staff for putting a big emphasis on this. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First of all, county motor fuel tax. Scott, can you explain the $3 million as a deduction in the fund balance?
Great question, Ms. Williams. So, like many of the highway-related funds, we will build up the reserves and in anticipation of a major project. And then once those reserves, normally in combination with state and/or federal funding, gets secured and the design is actually done, then we will actually draw down on those built-up reserves for that project. And so what we have in county motor fuel tax for next year is, as you said, almost a $3 million drawdown in reserves. There are a number of projects. I'd probably let either Amy or Jeff maybe highlight a couple of those projects where the majority of that money is going to go to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the projects we're gearing up for is the Maxwell Road corridor. We're doing a bridge project next year, and the year after we're doing the road project from 116 over to Dirksen. So that's going to be a large amount. So we've been kind of putting money away to use it when we have that project. We also just finished up Glen Avenue with the city of Peoria, and that was a large expense out of our motor fuel tax. And we just wrapped up or are wrapping up the Old Galena corridor, and that also took a large chunk out of our motor fuel tax account.
Sure. You have anything else?
So I know you talked just a second about it, but facilities and grounds, we're adding 3 positions. Can you tell me where those 3 positions are going to be located?
Happy to, Ms. Williams. I know it says in the book that it goes from 8 to 11. That's a typo on our part. The recommendation is only 2 additional positions, so we go from 8 FTEs to 10 FTEs. And the recommendation is for one of those 2 positions to be a maintenance engineer here at the courthouse, and the other one to be a maintenance engineer at the jail.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Jimmy?
Before I ask for an explanation, though, I should say kudos to Amy and Jeff on Old Galena about getting ready to wrap up, because I remember sitting when we got called to a meeting with Caterpillar about 12 years ago or however long, trying to figure out how to pay for that portion of road, being one of the largest office buildings in the country, and the shape of that road to where we're at today, to actually having finished it when we sat down and had no idea how we were going to accomplish that. So thank you to both of you, or both of you after your staff, or after it's finished. And I haven't been out there in a couple of weeks, but it was looking really good. So thank you to them. And then Scott, or maybe Mark, but I think Scott can handle it. So in the last week when we met, one of the questions I asked was, why was ETSB's conference room upgrades in the budget when we have talked about that building potentially needing to be tore down? So just for the staff, or for the board, can you explain your explanation, please?
Yeah. Happy to, Mr. Dillon. After the budget binder was published, I had an opportunity to meet and discuss the fleet garage replacement with the chair of the Emergency Telephone Systems Board, that being Mr. Tuttle. The conversation was about an opportunity to include the ETSB's offices in that fleet garage project, which also includes replacing the salt dome and the fueling station and the maintenance buildings at the Highway Department's main offices on Plank Road. We refer to as Maxwell Station. Chairman Tuttle was very cooperative and eager to have the ETSB be a part of that project. I realize on my end that's a little bit of scope creep, but I think it is a good solution in the long term for the ETSB to have. We'll dedicate space in the new building for them so that they can have their offices, have their whatever record storage they need, and then obviously meeting space if we can cohabitate on the meeting space for when they have their board meetings, and if any other needed meeting space, we'll do that. And then long term, then once we get that new building constructed, then we can look at demolition of where the ETSB currently is. For those of you that don't know, that building was originally constructed when Bellwood Nursing Home was constructed, and it was the residence of the director of the nursing home for a number of years.
Anything else, Jim? Okay. Other questions? Directed? Not having any more comments, more questions, I'll call for a vote on our infrastructure budget for 2024. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? I guess I should say nay. No nays? All right. Our infrastructure budget for 2024 is adopted, or I should say recommended to the board. Moving on to our regular meeting for this month in regards to the infrastructure committee. We will move on to our informational items. I don't see our director of the Greater Peoria Sanitary District here. Is there anybody here to represent them?
Mr. Chairman, there is not today. Mr. Johnson contacted me this morning, and he had unfortunately a conflict arise that he couldn't be here today, but if you have any questions, or the committee does, I will be passing them on to him so that he can respond.
The two things that I marked on mine was in regard to their auditor. I just wondered where their auditor was from. This, they're on about, it's about the third paragraph from the end. It says about Chairperson Gates introducing the people from this Phillips Semi and Associates. I just wonder where they were located. And then I handed this to our legal counsel, and at the top of the very next page it says, upon chairman's motion. And I always thought a chairman could not make a motion, and she's been researching. You want to comment on it?
In small boards, the chairperson can make a motion.
Is that right?
I just looked that up and learned that as well.
Boy, I never known that. In small boards, does it say what size? It does not say. Well, I mean, I think, what do they have? Heather, you on that 5 members or 7 members? 5, okay. Less than a dozen. Are you saying then the school board president can make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, we're lucky that we actually have a sanitary district board member in the audience. Their external auditor hails from Washington over in Tazewell County.
Okay. Yeah. That's keeping it in Illinois at least. All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments that it could be answered here or taken back to Brian Johnson? All right, moving on, we've got our next one, which Mark will handle for us, our facilities master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This month's updates, there's a few new items on the list, but I'll go through them quickly here.
Not me. That's not me.
First one is the IT and public defender remodel. IT space is 90% done. There's 3 offices still have to be completed, and the staff has moved back in there. Public defender space is done. We're just working through some punch list items to get them moved in, so that should happen in the next few weeks, we're hoping. Out at the jail, the CUVs in the kitchen, those have been on there a bit on this list for a while. Those are slated to be done in October. They've got to drain some of the system out there to be able to do that, along with the next one, which has to do with the boilers. So both of those are kind of tied together. They're going to try to do those together. So hopefully come October, those will be completed. Jail roof replacement. I was out by there over the weekend, and all the equipment is staged, and they were supposed to start that project, I believe today, Calvin? Yeah, they were supposed to start this week. They've been getting equipment all set and everything out there, so that'll get going this week. The Ring Road, if you remember, we're going to rebid that one this fall for spring, finalizing specifications on that. The jail brick tuck pointing and repair is going on. If you drive out by the jail, you'll see several of on the Maxwell roadside, several of the corners and stuff have been taken off the jail, and they're working on those. So that project is started and moving along. The JDC boiler replacement, we were here last month to get approval on that. That's a free project that was funded by Ameren. So the natural gas incentive funds are covering that, and that will be completed by the end of the year to qualify for that. There is a new project on here that is actually just went out for bid, and those bids are due back by October 30th. We are having issues at the JDC with the detainees breaking sprinkler heads in flooding rooms. So that has occurred, I believe, 3 or 4 times now, Shauna. We just had another occurrence about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we are going to go out for bid and put in new tamper-proof sprinkler heads, which are flush with the ceiling to keep that from happening. And from talking with, I was talking with Brian Brown about it the other day. It's not just here; it's going on other places too. So there's approximately 222 sprinkler heads out there that need replaced. So that is out for bid on the street right now. We'll bring that back to you when those bids are due on October 30th. So roof replacement for the JDC is tied into the jail project. So those will be, that's all part of that project. The JDC parking lot repair, which you guys rejected earlier this year, that'll get rebid for spring of 2024. The courthouse roof replacement should be starting within the next couple of weeks. We're waiting for final details, and so that we can get ahead of that game to get communication out, because it is going to impact parking around this facility once we get their exact plan, how they're going to attack each tower, whether they're going to do them both together or one-on-one. So, but they are getting ready to mobilize and getting final details together, and we'll get a plan from them hopefully in the next week or so. So that'll get started here in the next 2 weeks. The Hamilton Steps replacement, that'll supposed to also start before the end of the month. That's the latest we've got on the update from Opperly on those. Still on the list is the boardroom 402 AV system upgrades. As you can see, everything's working. There's still some things we're tweaking in these rooms. Another little piece of equipment we got to add to that room, but we're getting down to the 99 percentile of everything working okay. As soon as everything's finished, then we'll test all that, make sure it meets the requirements that were original, and then we'll sign off and close that out. So one other item that is not on this list, which was brought up by a couple of folks and on staff, and we're investigating, is we have moisture issues within the stair towers over at the parking deck, and it's caused from both rain and lack of ventilation within those stair towers. Calvin had a meeting with Opperly about a month ago and walked through and looked at them all. Some of the step risers and treads in there that support all that are rusted pretty badly, and there is ventilation issues in those. They recommended that we reach out to engineering company to come in and take a look at the steel that's in there. Can it be saved? If not, what needs replaced? We met probably 2 or 3 weeks ago with Midwest Engineering, and they are going to send a couple guys down to test some of the steel that's rusted to see how severe it is before we go on to our next step. But it's something we're definitely going to have to look into because the stairs are all rusting. Whether some of that can be cut out and replaced, we don't know yet, or how big of sections. And then we've got to look into where the water's coming from. A couple of them, it's just water that comes in from around the building and drains to the lowest point and drains down towards some of the stairs on one side. We're going to see if we can get that fixed. And as it goes on, we'll let you know whether we're going to have to engage Midwest Engineering to put together specs and all that for that bid, and then what that cost is going to be. But that's kind of early stages in the process. I know that, I believe Monica had brought it up, and it was brought up by a couple other folks. So we're working on it. Any questions about anything?
Mark, what's the approximate time when they start on our roof here to roof the courthouse?
I'm going to say within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, but I mean, I know you said within next, how long would it take them to get it done?
I don't have their project plan yet. I have a project plan for the jail and the JDC. That runs out through December till final completion out there. I have not seen theirs yet to know exactly what's occurring on what dates. We have that for the jail and JDC right now. We don't have it for this building yet. But it is all slated to be done before the end of the year. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else with questions? Sharon?
This would be a Scott question. Scott, can you give us an overview of what the plan is for the facilities master plan for the 2024 budget?
Sure thing, Ms. Williams, thank you. So a couple of different components. First is a more targeted deep dive into the jail. If you recall, we went out for RFQ for that. We have our responses. The sheriff and Mark and I are evaluating those, and our recommendation will come to the committee a month from now in terms of which vendor we would recommend we use to do a deep dive and create the long-term strategy for the jail. As it relates to the overall master plan for the entire organization and all of our facilities, we've got some money set aside in consulting services that will allow us to go out for RFP once the budget is adopted to then select a firm to update the facilities master plan that was prepared roughly 15 years ago and needs to be updated.
Jim?
Why Mark's still up here, I think quite a few of us have had questions, and maybe Scott can touch on it first, about the parking deck fund and its reserves and why it has as much money in it. But my question was for the parking deck to Mark, was that would be coming out of reserves and not getting into our other capital funds.
Right. We budget general maintenance for the parking deck within the annual budget there, but anything over that's capital related would come out of that fund balance.
But Scott, while we're here, would you maybe just touch on the enterprise fund for?
Happy to, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Dillon. So the parking deck fund is our one and only enterprise fund, which means that it is, from an accounting standpoint, it is set up and intended to be and run like a business. So that means it's supposed to be profit-oriented from a governmental accounting perspective. It also means that there's different accounting rules to be applied. And both past and current external auditors have routinely advised that it be set up as an enterprise fund. And that also means that as we apply those different accounting principles to it, that means that we have to do things a little bit differently than the other funds. And the primary difference is how we account for depreciation of the asset. And under those accounting principles and standards, the depreciation of the asset is intended to be used to replace the asset once it's fully depreciated. We've got, probably another, I think, 5 to 8 years before the asset is fully depreciated. That means we also have to budget for that on an annual basis, and it shows up in the reserves of this fund. So it's a separate fund first and foremost. So and that separate fund is classified as an enterprise fund. As an enterprise fund, we have to account for the depreciation separately, and it is included in the reserve. So it looks like it has a substantial reserve, and it does, but the reason why it does is we have to account for the depreciation in those reserves. When we have capital improvements, such as the one Mark just articulated, come up, whether they're planned or unplanned, we can use those reserves and dip into the depreciation value to cover those, because that's the intent of how the fund is structured. So hopefully that answers your question.
Anyone else? Anyone else with any questions before we move on? Okay, thanks, Mark. Our first and only resolution, you see it here. I'm going to make a comment before I even. So they were really kind to us this year. Last year's committee, we not only had the budget, but we had 8 resolutions that day. I brought last year's committee assignment for our work on that day. But I looked at it and I said, God almighty, we must have been there. I didn't look to see what the time was, but they're being kind to us this year. And so we're going to appreciate it. But let's give it a good discussion anyway. We need a motion to look at a resolution dealing with the engineer for our highway department and the chief engineer who is our director. Can I have a motion on that? Motion by Betty, second by Terry. Okay. Scott, you going to take that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So this is a resolution the committee has seen several times before. The way this works is if we agree to participate in this program, of which all but 3 counties in the state of Illinois do. The 3 counties that don't are Cook, DuPage, and Lake. IDOT tells us what the county engineer's minimum salary will be, and in exchange for that, we get 50% of that reimbursed into the county MFT fund. As shown in the resolution, IDOT has said that we are, based on population and other factors, we're the 10th ranked county, with those top 3 not participating. The recommended minimum salary for our county engineer is $141,200 starting January 1st. When Ms. McLaren was originally appointed, We did not participate in this program, but we have since started participating in the program. Looking at the fine print of the IDOT forms that are in your packet, you'll note that we actually only need to do this in the first year of the county engineer's appointment. A couple months ago, the board approved Amy's appointment for a third term that will start next month. We bring this forward this year. It will be valid for the next 6 years, or the length of Amy's third term. So we would recommend that the resolution be passed, and that we will be participating in the program for the next 6 years. That also means that we will not have this resolution before you until 6 years from now.
Question, Mr. Chairman. However, during that 6 years, we could open her salary and give her more. Am I right on that?
Correct.
Okay. She's getting a 2% raise now. I don't know how that compares to every one of the other directors in our county, but personally, and I know she's sitting in the audience, and it's easy to say this, but I'll compliment her on her job and so forth, because I think she works well inside the building, which a good engineer has to do, because most of these large construction companies, many of them, are run by that engineer inside that particular company's building. And many of these engineers are highly paid. But she also gets out in the field. Having worked for on construction, I know I would see many engineers in the Illinois Department of Transportation, and 5 or 10 years later, they would be hired by some contractor to become their engineer inside the building. I don't want that to happen to us. I don't want somebody to come along and snag Amy off. So I just want to point out that we could raise her salary anytime we wanted to, or give her a bonus or something like that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I know I could ask for comments by our two commissioners, because she has to work with the commissioners, and I'm sure there may be some complaints by these people out there, but I've not heard from them directly. Now I'll start getting all the phone calls. If there's no comments or questions on this, I'll call for a vote on it in regards to the recommendation and adoption of this resolution. All those signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No nays? Okay, then this resolution has been adopted. Going on to our next resolution, next part of the agenda, public comment. Do we have anybody here with public comment? No one is available to make public comment? No comment by anybody in the audience? All right. Moving on to miscellaneous. Nobody with miscellaneous. Boy, we had a short meeting. Thankful for that. If that is going to be it, then this meeting is adjourned.